There will be spoilers ahead. Lots of spoilers, so be careful, won't you? Welcome to another episode of Max Mike Movies. Remember, you asked for it. And who is you? This week, you is Keith Wright. And what did he ask for? He asked that we watch a movie called Brother to Brother. And so we did. And now we're doing a show about it. Because that's what we do. And every sentence ends with an exclamation point. Just like the dialogue in any given 1960s Marvel comic. I can't stop it. If I have any hope of stopping, it's going to come from that Master of Moviness, Master of Moviness Levine. Help me out of this hole, Max. Help me.
Hold, mortal. Behold my dramatic Kirby pose with spatula fingers.
It didn't work.
No!
Deep breath. Because it's just little old me. Mike, stop exclaiming loose. And maybe if I can just reach that switch. Okay, no, I have no idea what Marvel Comics has to do with this week's movies. But what I do know is that y'all answered our poll question thusly. Whew! Damn! Poll question. Last week's question was, what alternative history movie is your favorite? Y'all had some really varied and interesting answers. We start with Chrissy Becker-Krenitsky, who wrote, quote, Inglourious Bastards or Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, end quote.
Sure.
Very cool indeed. Thanks, Chrissy. Just out of curiosity, why is Inglourious Bastards considered alternative history?
We'll get to that.
Oh, because it's going to be in your answer, too. Okay.
Yep.
Dr. Rebecca Pelkey was next with, quote, probably Prey, the latest film in the Predator franchise. It's set in the early colonial West and told from an indigenous perspective, end quote. And it was also a very cool movie. Thanks, Becca. Although, have they proven there weren't predators in our past?
I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens.
Thanks, Giorgio. Regan McStravick answered, quote, from an alternative history standpoint, I actually rather liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, end quote. I haven't seen it. Does that count, Max?
Yeah, it does. Well, it's funny. Most of it follows history, and then at the end, it's like, nope.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, in any case, thanks, Regan. Ed Shields tossed out, quote, CSA, the Confederate States of America, end quote.
Boy.
Ooh, a Spike Lee joint. Thanks, Ed. Boy,
Yeah, that's
Spike Lee doing a movie about an alternative history where the Confederate won.
Yeah.
That sounds
It's
fun.
hard to watch. It's actually really interesting because it's done as a documentary. Or a fake documentary. And he splices in a bunch of ads, or he does his own version of ads for, like, black products, and some of them he made up, like, oh no, your slave's running away, better use the slave shock collar.
Oh man, no.
Oh yeah, slavery, in this alternate history, slavery is still exists.
Ugh.
And then there are some that were real, actual ads, like think who was the syrup lady? Aunt Jemima. Only worse. They were real. I'm not even going to...
They didn't have any for black acting school?
They did not, and they should have.
That's too bad. All right. Well, that was Robert Townsend anyway.
Yeah.
Keith Wright, actor, and this week's film contributor, sent, quote, Time Bandits, end quote. I'm amazed that was our first time travel movie listed. Thanks, Keith.
Okay.
That's multiple alternate histories.
Yeah.
Boys has something to say. Posted, quote, I will go with Death of Stalin, since you know I have not seen it. Oh, Dave. Japanese do all sorts of alternative history movies, so much so that it is hard to puzzle out the real history. I particularly like Samurai Assassin, which stars Mifune as the guy who really assassinated Lee Naosuke, maybe?
Naosuke, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So he really assassinated Lee Naosuke, maybe. This one is in the Criterion Collection. A little slow for modern audiences, but much loved. Also, Irozato, which is partially about how a guy named Sarazawa's girlfriend participated in getting him assassinated. I could watch it over and over. There's also a TV series called The Yagyu Conspiracy, which starts with the Tokugawa Hidetada, the second Tokugawa shogun, getting assassinated, and runs from there with a succession battle. The succession battle has some basis in history, but the villain is a fabrication, and the Hidetada was never assassinated, end quote. Well, yes, indeed. Well, we always get a history and culture lesson from Dave, so thanks, Dave.
I am not entirely sure the death of Stalin counts as alternate history, because everything that happens in it happened.
Well, as he pointed out, he only picked it because he knew we knew he hadn't seen it after he suggested it for the show, but that's fine.
Very clever, Dave. Very clever indeed.
Yes. Lastly, Vince, who tells me that, wait, this can't be true. Penguins aren't native to Canada? Oh, you better check your facts, Vince. I mean, just look out the window. They're everywhere. Huge flocks of them flying about. Yeah, I know.
Yep.
Well, anyway, man. Vince
out
from
there playing hockey.
Canada. Yeah. He says, quote, I have two choices. Who framed Roger Rabbit? An alternate history if there ever was one.
Oh, wow.
As chaotic and messed up as it would be in real life, the idea of cartoons living in the real world is really fun. Insignificance from Nicholas Roeg, a film which asks the age-old question, what if Marilyn Monroe, Kennedy, Joe DiMaggio, and Albert Einstein were in the same hotel room? Oh, my.
Another one? Oh, man.
Oh, my. Marilyn Monroe explains the general theory of relativity to Einstein to prove that she can using toys. It's a great film that delves into the fears of each person in flashbacks as only Nicholas Roeg can do them, end quote. Well,
I never heard of this. I think I got to watch this.
I mean, the idea
sounds wild.
I actually just am trying to picture Marilyn Monroe using toys to explain the theory.
I want to see it just for that.
Yeah. Well, another one I'd never heard of. So thanks, Vince. But what about you, Max? You asked, so you must have an amazing answer. Oh, there's that exclamation point again.
I would go with Inglourious Bastards because it gives a much more satisfying version of the death of Adolf Hitler and a lot of the senior Nazis.
How satisfying do you want it to be? I mean, he kills himself.
Yeah, but he gets machine gunned in a theater in terror and shock, and to his complete surprise, and right where he thinks he's at a great triumph. Very satisfying.
Triumph of the bread?
Triumph of the bread. Won't you allow bread into your life?
Yeah.
I would go with that one. Yeah, there's a few others. I never would have thought of Roger Rabbit, but that's actually a pretty good one.
Yeah, I agree.
What about you? What's your favorite?
I don't really have a movie one, per se. Nothing, or at least nothing leapt out at me and said, this is the movie you should pick for this week's poll question. Because that's what my inner voice sounds like these days.
Your inner voice is very old, apparently.
Yes, apparently it's very old. I chose an episode of a TV show. I chose City on the Edge of Forever from Star Trek.
Oh,
because the alternate history, which admittedly involves time travel, which we generally don't like, but which there are repercussions for in that episode, like, about your ship. You know that crazy guy who jumped through the little portal there? He erased all of your history, so you don't exist. Oh, we better go fix that. Okay. And there is a really amazing choice having to be made by Captain Kirk, which is basically, do you save somebody you've grown fond of and doom everybody to a totally different alternate history, or do you let her die the way she was supposed to and just deal with the consequences for the rest of your life, knowing that you let somebody die that you could save? And
you could have saved Joan Collins.
Yeah, you could have. And she wouldn't have had to be an Empire of the Ants. But
it's funny, though, if you're thinking of Star Trek, I would have gone with Yesterday's Enterprise from Next Gen.
And
I think that's a great one, both on time travel and all. That's the one where
don't say Mark Twain.
A starship shows up, and suddenly it turns out the Federation is still at war with the Klingon Empire.
Oh, that's right. Isn't that the one where we got Tasha Yar back, and she's like, "You're not supposed to be here." And she ends up going off with the guy who looks like Joe...
Piscopo?
Yeah, it looks like Joe Piscopo, but it's not him. There's an actor that kind of looks like him. Or I should say, looks like Joe Piscopo used to look like, because as we both saw recently, Joe Piscopo does not look like Joe Piscopo anymore.
No, I don't know who he looked. He looks like like an old mobster now.
Yeah, it's just really weird. But all of your answers were fantastic answers, and we thank you. We're hoping you show such passion again when you give us answers to this week's question, which is, what kind of movie would you like to see more of in theaters right now? We all seem to be burned out by superheroes and remakes, so what would get your butts in seats? I don't know about you, Max, but whenever I look at what's playing, nothing is grabbing me to make me go see it.
Yeah, not really.
Yeah. So do tell us, and we'll be sure to tell Hollywood right away, and we'll fix everything.
Yep.
Before we tell
We're that powerful.
We are. But before we tell you how to answer us, there's the rest of the show.
The facts.
Yeah, we're talking about the movie Brother to Brother. Budget. Absolutely no idea. This is about as non-Hollywood a production as you can get. Take. Well, it played a lot of film festivals, most notably LGBT-themed ones, so the take is only listed as $80K. So I would say do not use this as a guide of any kind. The movie references participants of the Harlem Renaissance, which took place through the 20s and 30s, and it is a huge topic that we can't really touch on without going down a very long road, but suffice to say it is an important part of our history, and the inclusion of gay writers and artists was indeed a part of the movement, though not without some protestation. Now, Max, have you looked into that at all, or do you know anything more trivial about this film? Because, man, was it bleak.
No, about the film, not really. I found out some stuff about the Harlem Renaissance I thought was interesting.
Oh, by all means, please.
Well, first off, apparently the people who were actually involved in it didn't like that term.
Oh, yeah.
At the time, it was just called the New Negro Movement. And it was an anthology which is named after an anthology from Alan Locke of the same name, just called the New Negro. It was a fascinating and gorgeous movement from basically between the world wars. It goes from the 20s and the 30s. And it was this literal renaissance. You had a whole lot of black people, a lot of former slaves, and a lot of the children of former slaves fleeing the South. Can't think why.
Gee.
Yeah. Because they got kind of sick of, being lynched and not being allowed to vote, even though they were supposed to be able to. And generally treated like crap. They went to the North. A lot of them settled in New York. A lot of them settled in Harlem. And there were some incredible writers involved. You got Langston Hughes. You got Zora Neale Hurston. James Baldwin. All these guys who I am ashamed to say I have read so little of. I've read some James Baldwin. That's it. I've never read Hurston. I've never read any Langston Hughes.
Yeah.
I don't know if Philip Larkin counts. I think he's later.
Same here, but here's the thing for me. I haven't read a lot of white quote-unquote literature either. I tend to be more of a genreist, and as such, it turns out I probably read plenty of fiction and stuff by people of all sorts of backgrounds. I don't really care. I just care, is it good? So, yeah, I'm a bad English major because I'm not an English major.
Well, then how can you be a bad one? There, I've run rings around you logically. Anyway,
whatever.
Yeah, and it wasn't just literature. It was art, painting, and music, and theater. And it was remarkable. It was a hell of a time. They faced an awful lot. And the difficulty is, and they're not wrong about this, it's kind of the theme of the movie, a lot of the African-American artists wanted to be recognized. They wanted their voices to be heard, and a number of them were gay.
Yeah.
I mean, like a number of anyone was gay. And they were even more heavily put upon, even by the others in the movement. They're like, come on, we've got to speak with one voice. We want people to hear us. And people like Langston Hughes and Bruce Nugent were, we want to be heard too, and we're part of the same voice. Caused a lot of stress for these folks. Because, 30s and 40s being gay, well, they hadn't really invented gay yet.
No.
Gay didn't exist until the 1960s.
As we all know.
Yep. There's a ton about it, and I only know the most superficial levels. World War II pretty much shot it all to hell.
Well, amongst other things, but yeah.
Yeah.
I did a quick read through of stuff about the Harlem Renaissance too, just to have some identification with it. And of course, it's a major part of the movie, so I'm glad that the movie introduced me to a bunch of stuff that I would not have known. And we'll get into some of that a little bit later. But thanks for looking that stuff up, because it is a very important part of our country's history and needs to be looked into. And hey, what better month? It's February. So I'll go on with the plot.
Yeah.
Sometime in the late 80s, the film never makes this clear, a young college student, Perry, is going through some tough times. Having been found to be gay by his parents, he's been thrown out and has to make his way through life and school alone. While wrestling with that, he initially finds comfort in one of his close friends, Jim. One night, after a bit of the old wheelie-dealy, the two start making out, and one thing leads to another. But it's a tenuous connection at best. While Perry and another friend are comparing notes on poetry, an old man wanders by and recites a bit of his own, then walks on. Stunned as to its quality, Perry finds out that this old man is Bruce Nugent, a member of the Harlem Renaissance, though now he's just Bruce, homeless man. Perry can't figure out how someone of Bruce's stature has ended up on the street, so befriends him and learns more about both his culture as well as what it was like to be black and gay in those times. Through flashbacks and current-day threads, the lives of Perry, Bruce, and others are shown to be woven together and will likely be echoing into the future to come. One night, Perry agrees to pose for Bruce, who hasn't been able to paint for a long time. Perry, also a painter, swaps places when Bruce is done so that each has completed a portrait of the other. After that, Bruce suddenly dies, leaving Perry alone again to contemplate his direction as well as that of those who came before him. The end.
The film.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, Max, wild guess here. You had never heard of this film.
Nope.
Yeah.
No idea.
Me either. This was suggested again by one of our poll question answers, Keith Wright, who is also an actor, and I think it's a very well-known, highly respected, second-best podcast in the universe, Q Footsteps,
right.
Is it not?
I think so. Yes, that cute little also ran.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually much higher quality than that, and Max and I have absolutely nothing to do with it. So
Nothing. No conflict of interest here.
No. Keith is one of the actors there, and this was one of his suggestions, and I picked it because the description of the film, which as always is the case on IMDb, was brief. It sounded interesting. I got to say, whoever writes the blurbs for movies, when they can take things like Dune 1 and Dune 2 and get it down to one sentence, I'm pretty amazed.
That's pretty impressive, yeah.
Well, we have, for me, what is mostly an unknown cast. However, there is one standout who... I tried to see if there was any interviews, and I couldn't find any, because I honestly wonder what he thinks of having done this film. And that's our star, Anthony Mackie, probably better known these days as Captain America.
Yep. Only in this, he's a baby.
He's very young. This was 21 years ago, so I'm going to guess he's in his early 20s.
Yeah. He's a little bitty Anthony Mackie.
Yeah. And he plays Perry, the art student who's been thrown out of his parents' house and who is trying to make his way through both a country and a culture that doesn't really want gay people. What did you think of Anthony Mackie?
I thought he did a remarkable job. I had no idea he had this kind of depth in him. Because all I've really seen him in is the Avengers movies and Captain America.
Yeah.
First he's the Falcon, then he's Captain America.
Yeah.
Then he's Captain Falcon, then he's the American Falcon.
No, he's not. Stop that.
Then he's a Falcon American.
No, he isn't.
That's the appropriate term.
Oh, smack you. So what you thought he did pretty well?
Yeah. I thought he did a really nice job. I mean, I thought he was very moving, considering the movie's very short.
Yeah. Well, it's 90 minutes. It's not. I mean, we've actually had films shorter than this. Roger Corman.
True.
That felt longer. Roger Corman.
Yes. So that is definitely true.
Yeah.
I thought he.
I thought he did a great job too. He was very natural, and he's a brave actor because he's playing a very gay part. And there is some. Now we don't see like the actual sex, but he's making out pretty heavily with his friend Jim, and. it's not like they're doing it in a dark room and we're seeing it from like 2 rooms away. They're pretty close up with it. And there's 2 schools of thought on this. A lot of times you'll hear gay people say they should have hired a gay actor to do this. Why are they giving these parts to straight people? And I don't know the reasoning behind this director's choosing of a gay actor. That being said, whenever anybody does it and they throw themselves into it, I just applaud them, because you know that this could come and mess up your career later on because people are stupid. So hats off to him, although I am wearing a hat. We have Roger Robinson, whom I don't know, as Bruce.
Don't know who he is. What a cool voice this guy has.
Oh, dear gods, it's like liquid velvet. When he just sort of walks up and starts doing what turns out, I didn't know there was a term for this. He starts doing something called jazz poetry, which is a poetry that is specifically written with the idea of jazz music in mind and is meant to be lyrical and have parts that repeat like refrains. I didn't know anything about this, but I was instantly interested. Like, what is this?
It's often meant to have jazz music playing behind it.
Yeah, but not always. And of course, this would lead into a number of things, not least of which is the beat generation, because of course, a lot of beat poetry was very much like this, very rhythmic, meant to be recited, and would sometimes have music behind it. But of course, hip hop can draw its line directly to this.
Oh yeah.
And I don't even like hip hop. But yeah.
And I think he does a really nice job. I think he's a very good actor.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know why we don't know anything about him.
Unfortunately, most of the cast is like this.
Yeah.
Alex Burns, who doesn't even have a picture on IMDb, he's the white guy that Perry's going
That's pretty much his part. He's the white guy.
Yeah, and it's a kind of thankless part, because it comes down to a plot point where basically Perry decides he can't be with him because he realizes at the very base of the relationship there is either some racism or some fetishism going on, and he doesn't want to be with somebody who's fetishizing or thinking of him other than just as himself. And we never get to go back to it.
Well, that's part of it. We also don't, because Jim denies this, and it's very hard for him to prove it. He's just saying this is how it feels. But also, Perry is saying he wants a boyfriend. He wants someone serious. He wants a relationship, and he doesn't think Jim does, and Jim doesn't deny that.
Well,
I think Jim just wants to have fun.
I think that Jim isn't given a chance in the film. That being said,
we don't really know his side.
This isn't a film about white people, and that's fine.
No.
However, Perry does have a heartbreaking quote, because he actually just admits to Jim, quote, "I need someone who's willing to love me," end quote, which is just heartbreaking and true.
But yeah, especially when you realize how his family treated him.
Well, which is...
We'll get to that.
Yeah, it hasn't changed much. We have Kevin Jackson, who plays the college professor. Not a huge part, but I like the even-handedness of him, because on the one hand, sometimes Perry is getting into arguments in class with a homophobic classmate who's also black, and this guy Isaiah is not taking sides. He's like, you're both being jerks. You need to calm down. And he has a point. There's certain things that are not part of the assignment that you're throwing in there, and you need to take them out, because that's not what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, small part, but I thought well played.
Yeah, I think he did a nice job. The other thing I think is in effect, there's 2 casts.
Right.
There's the cast that's in the modern day, and then there's young everybody.
Right, from the Renaissance.
Young Brute. Yep, from the actual Harlem Renaissance. Like, what do you think of Dwayne Boot, or Bout, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Boutte, as the young Bruce?
I actually thought that he and Roger Robinson were eerily similar. Like, their voices and their... I don't know, I could totally believe that young Bruce grows up into old Bruce.
The guy doing young Bruce really did a lot with trying to use the same kind of facial expressions as Roger Robinson, and he even kind of tried to carry himself the same way. I thought he did a really good job.
And he's very charismatic. Like, you can totally see him being part of a movement and being part of a group, and occasionally trying to do things to keep the group together, even though they're against the wishes of some of his other members, like Langston Hughes. Because at one point, one of the other people steals from young Bruce, and
Langston does.
No, it's not him. It's Wally who does it. Langston says, "Why did you let him get away with it?"
Yeah.
And he's like, we're all together. We should all be sharing and stuff. And Langston's like, that's not the same thing. And it was an interesting dynamic. So we actually sort of were skipping back and forth, but Lawrence Gilliard Jr., who plays Marcus, his Perry's best friend, I loved his recitation, his poetry, his jazz poetry.
His poetry was good.
It totally was.
Damn.
And I think it's interesting that they don't make clear whether some characters are gay or not, because I initially thought Jim was straight, because he talks about getting women and stuff. And we don't know if Marcus is gay or not, but it's obvious that he and Perry are not couple
They're
material.
not together.
No.
Yeah.
But they support each other, and I think that's really cool. And actually, Marcus is trying to push Perry into doing things to get himself more known as a painter. But yeah, his first recitation of jazz poetry, it's like, what's this? I'm interested. I didn't know anything about this. And then, Bruce comes by and it's like the Velvet Smog, and it's just, oh my God. It's so, yeah, not a huge part, but I liked him too.
Yep, he was definitely believable.
Daniel Sunjata is Langston Hughes. And man, what a dapper man about town he is, right?
That was the thing. I have not read Langston Hughes. I know a little about him just from general literary history. He was considered very elegant, and he had a lot of presence. That's one of the reasons he sort of became a spokesman for the entire movement, is he was just cool.
Yeah. Do you think that this actor, Daniel Sunjata, brings that forth?
I think so, as much as I know, which is not much.
He seemed to me to be, I thought he was going to end up being more or less the leader, because he's in a way the more charismatic of the group. And Bruce starts off kind of quiet and then comes more and more into himself. And he seems to be a lot more of the energy as we see it in this. But yeah. It's
understandable, because like Langston is already known and Perry is nobody when they meet him. He hasn't published anything. He hasn't written anything.
You mean Bruce?
Bruce, excuse me.
Yeah.
So he's in awe of Langston and somewhat in awe of Wally.
Yeah, who's played by Ray Ford, again, with a lot of charisma. And of the group, it's like, oh, yeah, he's the gay one. Well, him and Bruce, you can say, yeah, he's. And he's very bright and very shining, and what happens to him is very sad. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, as it turns out, because he writes about it committing suicide in his play, and then that's exactly what he does.
Yeah.
So.
Except he doesn't. The way they present it in the movie is that they show him cutting his wrists, which is what the character in his book did. He didn't. He drank himself to death.
Yeah. I also appreciate, this is a weird thing, but I appreciate that they actually never show people cutting their wrists the proper way in a movie, because they don't want people to do it. And it's one of those weird technical quote-unquote mistakes that I'm actually glad that they never fix, because we don't need people doing that. So
no.
I think the other
also
go ahead.
The other one I like is Ingenue Ellis Taylor, as she's just listed as Zora, but she's Zora Neale Hurston, as in Their Eyes Were Watching God. She's got real presence. She's got great power. She doesn't get to do anything.
No.
She gets like 2 or 3 scenes. She gets a half a dozen lines. But I wanted to know more about her. I wanted to see more of her.
Well, and that was one of the things that I saw in my brief glimpse into the Harlem Renaissance, is that there were plenty of women that were part of this. There's a character that we saw in an earlier film. Ma Rainey was apparently considered part of this as well. And
absolutely.
See our entire episode on Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, but yeah.
Yep, and her protege, Bessie Smith, absolutely.
Yeah, there is an amazing amount of history thrown into this, let's be fair, amateur production. I will go right out before, because I'm going to say there's a number of other people listed, but those are the major players in this film.
Oh, there's one other person I want to mention, because I didn't know who. He's in one scene, and he plays James Baldwin, and that's Lance Reddick.
Okay.
And if you don't know who Lance Reddick is, yes, you do. He's been in everything. He's the hotel manager in the John Wick movies,
which I haven't seen.
Yep. He's Zeus in Percy Jackson and the Olympians TV show. He's all over the place. You know him, I guarantee it. And I have no idea what James Baldwin actually sounded like. I know what he looked like, And they recreate a famous interview between James Baldwin, I almost said Alec Baldwin, but
very
no
different.
relation.
No.
And the activist Eldridge Cleaver. And they hated each other.
Yeah.
And they Eldridge Cleaver kind of embodied the entire black activist movement's attitude about their gay members.
Right.
Which is, we don't need you bitching about that. We got enough trouble.
Which, I mean, it's not really for either Max or us to say, but the whole point was to be taken seriously as, and I hate to use the word race because we're all human. There's only one race, but as a culture. And that does include gay people. I'm sorry that bothers you, but I'm on the side of the folks that were gay in here or bi or whatever, because, I mean, Ma Rainey was known to prefer women and was often pictured with them. And I think was it Bessie Smith who often appeared in men's clothing?
Yep.
So
she performed cross-dressing sometimes.
Pioneers of these people. So especially in today's current atmosphere, if you want to put it that way.
Oh, yeah, we've gotten so much better.
Oh, dear God. Well, that's the sad thing about this film. It was shot in 2004. It was shot on 16mm stock and then blown up to 35, which is why it looks the way it does.
I wondered why it looked like that. It's very grainy and blurry.
Yeah, there's actually a very well-known other film that you've seen and are a fan of that did the same thing.
Now, which one?
Clerks. Clerks was also shot in 16, which is why it, too, looks so grainy. Also, they shot a lot of it at night, which didn't help. I think, though, and usually this sort of thing, it's like, wow, the quality's not that great. I actually felt that it added to the realism. Did you? Or did you even notice it?
Yeah. I think it helped remind us that this isn't supposed to be current. They never actually make it clear when it is, except for the fact that I know Bruce Nugent, first of all, was a real person.
Right.
He was a member of the Harlem Renaissance, and he died in 1987.
Right. So
we know this is 1987.
Well, only because we looked it up, but they don't actually say anything.
Yes, exactly. But I was pretty sure it was the 80s. Because you notice there's nobody says anything about AIDS. And people were very quiet about that up until they were just starting in the mid-80s.
That's true, and I hadn't thought about that. What occurred to me was as soon as he pulled out a VHS tape, it's like, well, we haven't got to DVDs yet, so it's got to be somewhere in there.
Yeah, and also there's still things like anonymous sex at gymnasiums or bathhouses.
Right.
Which is something that kind of vanished when AIDS showed up.
Yeah. So, you're left to figure this out. Usually I don't like to second guess directors. I want to say that this was a mistake, not saying when it was, because I don't understand the reason for leaving it out, but it also helps cement the idea that these are, or at least Bruce is a real person. And that even, because you could easily decide, oh, they made up this guy as part of the Harlem Renaissance just so they could connect it back to this other group of people. So unless there's actually something factually stated, you don't necessarily know, because I wasn't sure, so I had to go look it up, and it's like, nope, it was a real person. And then, of course, at the end of the film, they're like, here's Bruce, but like, tell us at the beginning. I don't know why you wouldn't do that. I will say, too, that the low resnesses, anyway, the lack of film quality gives it an almost documentary feel to it.
Visually, yeah, because it doesn't feel like a documentary in any other way.
Well, and documentaries are meant to be truth, right? So I felt that it being quote-unquote on the cheap made it feel more real. And for the acting in general, I gotta say, besides being really good all around, except for the flashback parts, which felt like they were shot on a VHS camera, I want to say that the present-day stuff, I kept forgetting that they weren't the real people depicting themselves. I actually thought that it was a very natural acting all around. So
the performances in general are really good.
Yeah. I think part of the reason they're really good is they feel real and heartfelt without like feeling like they're acting. Jared Leto, take some notes. So, yeah. I don't know if poetry slams are still a thing, but I kind of want to go to one.
Oh, yeah. They still have them. They're rare, but you can find them.
Because if they're anything like when his buddy there, whose name I can't remember, Marcus, maybe, is reciting just on the stoop, it's like, I've never heard anything like that. where it's, and I know it's, and here's the thing, apparently jazz poetry is something not meant to be read, it's meant to be performed. And
that makes sense.
A friend of ours here, Dr. Rebecca Pelkey, I've read some of her poetry, and it's interesting, but when I see her perform it, it's totally different. And there's a lot of times when you don't know when the accents are supposed to be, and especially in poetry, accents can make a huge difference. So that grabbed me right from the beginning. And I also want to say that right from the beginning, we actually like Perry and Jim. We like them as friends, and we like them as characters, and that helps.
Yeah.
I will say...
I mean...
go ahead.
Perry is not presented either as a saint. He's not, he's not, I'm sorry for the term, the magical Negro.
No.
He's flawed, he's human, he's hurt because being thrown out by his parents, which is just friggin' really painful to watch. And that's something else I have to admire about this is the editing and the pace of a lot of the scenes, because they don't dwell. They really could wallow in how awful his father is to him.
Yeah.
And what happened, but they do it very quickly, just enough to get it into you, and it doesn't go away. And it's awful because it still happens all the time.
Yeah. And when it comes to gay films, because let's face it, this is a gay film. And if you are uncomfortable with seeing two men making out, then don't watch the film. But there are a couple of, I hate to use the word cliches, but cliches when it comes to gay cinema. And they have two of them. The one about him being thrown out by his parents, that's a very common one. I think it's handled very well. The other one, though, is there's a scene that I was kind of hoping we could avoid, and there is a beating scene later in the film. The interesting part is that it comes from one of his classmates. It doesn't come from
it was
outside.
him. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Well, of course, Perry's not supposed to know who it is, but it's very much that's who it is. And the reason that it happens is because someone suggests to Perry, I forget who it is, might be Marcus, that this guy in his class who keeps calling him out for bringing up gay stuff may be doing it because he's compensating, or he's trying to hide the fact that he's closeted himself. And that can elicit a lot of rage. And we end up having the beating scene, which I at this point prefer to avoid because it's become kind of cliche and overly dramatic. But I can't also deny that it does happen. So
the problem is that and the family throwing you out. That's a cliche because it happens a lot.
It's
real, and it happens often.
It's nice to occasionally see gay depiction that doesn't have to involve that, because after a while what happens is people decide that if you're gay you have to go through this, like that's just part of it. You can't tell a gay story if it doesn't involve these things, and there are stories that don't. A show both of us like, Heartstopper, has very minimal parts of that in there. It is not the main thrust. Most of it is just seeing people who happen to be gay having a happy relationship, which is so refreshing. I get why that's not part of this film, but part of me is also like, could we just show that the relationship and not this? Not because I want it to go away or magically don't think it doesn't happen anymore, because I don't want it to be permanently assumed that these things have to be part of a gay story. But that's me. But I do, at least that race I have a horse in. Right, Bumpy? He's a slow runner.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. I want to say, I think although I'm going to say this is mostly an actor's film, I'd say the writing is still pretty smart. Like the people who wrote this, or if it's just the director who wrote this, no, it was writer-director Rodney Evans.
Yep.
Not only does he know his stuff, and I'm not saying that he's on par with the writers that he's depicting, but I think his writing is actually really tight and well done. What did you think of the writing, or did it stand out to you at all?
It didn't stand out as much to me, except with the dialogue between Bruce and Perry. A lot of the other stuff sounded a little cliche to me. But Bruce and Perry, whenever they're talking, it feels real. Especially, I just loved it to hear Bruce talk. Not just because I loved Roger Robinson's voice, but because the language he uses, it is lyrical. He paints a picture. And he talks the way I always want to believe poets talk.
But he did not have a beret or a baguette or a cigarette to smoke while he was speaking his poetry. Which, actually, to bring up a point, turns out that not only when the Harlem Renaissance was going on was it centered a lot in Harlem, New York, but apparently there was a lot of French-speaking blacks that were also doing this in France at the same time, and they were highly influenced by it.
Yep.
So
that is absolutely true.
Yeah, I agree. We all wish we could be that suave, that erudite, that quick. And the way he portrayed it was just so effortless. Like you said, like that just happens to be the way he talked.
Oh, I wanted to ask you particularly, because this is definitely your wheelhouse. At the end, when they're each painting each other,
right?
What did you think of the paintings?
I thought they were painted by the same person.
Okay.
I think they probably were. Well, and here's the thing that's weird. Up till this point, we didn't know that Bruce painted. And part of that I thought we were going to have another Gods and Monsters happen again. Did you ever see Gods and Monsters?
I never did.
So it's basically, God, who's playing the old man? It's not Ian McKellen.
Is it Ian McKellen?
It is. Okay,
yeah,
so it's Ian McKellen and it's Brendan Fraser. And basically, he's playing James Whale, the director, who apparently was gay, which I didn't know. And Brendan Fraser is playing his gardener boy or whatever, and he's developed a fixation on him, and he eventually coaxes him in to pose for him, but it ends up turning out that he actually can't draw at all. He just wanted him to come in and so he could ogle him. Yeah, it's a really odd and interesting film. And I was worried that Bruce was going to end up being he doesn't really paint, he just wants to see Perry without a shirt on, but he does. It was a little kind of weird that he was also a painter, and they don't focus a lot on Perry's painting. The paintings themselves I thought were good, and I really enjoy. I'm a portraitist myself, so I was really interested that they're both doing portraiture, and it was kind of sad that that's how they depict Bruce dying, is that he gets sort of a last little wish and then he passes away. What did you think of the paintings?
I thought they were very good. I did think they were very similar, but I don't have an eye for that.
Yeah, I mean,
I liked the idea. You notice in the portraits, Perry is looking up, and Bruce is looking down. It's like Perry still has a future ahead of him, and Bruce is done, literally, in that he dies in the night. I also thought just his death scene was very touching, where they've fallen asleep just lying next to each other, fully clothed. And this was, again, what I thought was a tribute to Anthony Mackie. He reaches over, puts his hand on Bruce's, and just you see in his face. And right then I thought, oh no, his hand's cold. He's dead.
Yeah. And
that is what it was.
Yeah.
He just did it with that expression. I thought that was really impressive. I like that they didn't dwell on it so much. They didn't do paint me like one of your French girls.
I'm very glad that they did not do that.
Yeah.
And Perry's not nude either. He's just taking his shirt off. And then when the painting comes out, he's just on a bust anyway. We don't even see the rest of him. I actually liked the way they painted Bruce, because to me it gave him a feeling of power. You say it says he's done. I'm thinking that it's Perry looking up to him.
Oh.
So,
okay.
And it's
that
funny.
Works too.
Well, I mean, we could get on a whole thing about portraiture, but the 3/4 looking off into the distance pose is, how shall I put this, done to death, which is why I tend not to do it myself. But when you add little aspects of the angle, just being a little higher or lower than a person can totally change the way you view a picture, because again, from below you're elevating them, and from above you're looking down on them. So it's subtle, and I don't know how much of it was meant, but I'm always happy to see people painting in pictures in movies. So,
what did you think? There's a parallel with Perry and with some of the writers. With I think it was Langston and Zora.
Yeah,
we see this very painful scene where they go to a white publisher, and he's like, "Oh, we really love this, but you got to put basically more sex and violence, and you got to make it scarier." White readers want to hear about how dangerous the Harlem is and how dangerous the nightclubs are, and it's nothing to do with the voice. And they both say, no, sorry, don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And then Perry has a show at a Soho gallery, which is a big deal. I'm pretty sure it was a big deal back in the 80s, too. Mm-hmm. And his friend, and Marcus is trying to get him to sell himself a little bit, to, like, schmooze with the other gallery owners and the buyers and such. And Perry's just like, no, I won't do that. I won't compromise myself. Do you think it's the same?
Oh, not only is it the same, but it has nothing to do with race. I'm sorry to say that is true of any. If you have an agent or if you have a gallery, they are always looking for ways to make money. The art world is all about money. It has nothing to do with the art itself, what the artist is trying to say. You have to get to an exceedingly high level of popularity, regardless of who you are, before you don't have somebody breathing down your neck saying, you need to make more paintings like X, you need to make more paintings like Y. That being said, it was the one point I saw the parallel they were making, and I think that the parallel they made in the past, where it's obvious that the white publishers want what white people think is going on in Harlem to be depicted as opposed to what actually was. But honestly, with Perry as an artist in the current day, he's saying, we need you to make your paintings a little bit more accessible. He wasn't saying, we need you to paint white people. We need you to paint blah, blah, blah. Abstract art's a tough sell. And I, as somebody who has also done abstract art, which doesn't have an audience, I will tell you personally, I've been told many times just by friends, you've got to give the audience something for them to grab onto, or they can't approach your pictures. So I get where Perry's coming from, but if he wants to be a successful artist in the art world, that's going to be compromised. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, Asian, does not matter at all. I think it's very telling that at one point he's shown reading a book about Basquiat. Now, I don't know if there would have been a book about Basquiat at this point, because Basquiat, to the best of my knowledge, is still alive and still painting, because I think he dies in 89. And if the movie takes place in 87. But that being said, I'm not sure there would have been retrospectives and books about him as of yet. But Basquiat, he was so marginalized and presented as a black artist as opposed to just an artist. And his whole relationship with Andy Warhol, there was a lot of tokenism expressed about Basquiat's career. So I'm sure that was a telling point, but, this is me going off on an art tangent. Whee!
That's all right.
Wait, what is that?
Art's a big part of this movie.
That's the sound of our last listener closing the door behind them. Oh, well.
Oh, wait, come back. I won't let him do it again.
What do you think about the plot? And another follow-up question, is there one?
Well, things happen sequentially, so kinda. I mean, there's the sort of two plots of the time of Bruce's past and Bruce and Perry's present. It's a little hard to follow, and the chronology is a little strange. We find out, like, after the beating, Perry's been in bed for a week. And it just sort of jumps, which makes sense. I get it.
Yeah.
If you're assaulted, you get scared. You don't want to. I don't care who you are. You don't want to go out again because you're sure it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
It is terrifying. It just destroys your trust in the world.
Right.
I get that, but the plot, I would have liked to see a little more something holding it together. And this is just like this happens and this happens. And it's like, maybe something more with Perry struggling with whether he wants to compromise or whether he wants his success or staying true to his vision, the thing.
Yeah.
Maybe a more... that was one weakness I thought of this film. I thought there wasn't a lot of plot. It feels a little meandering sometimes.
Well, I think that, for me, the plotlessness of it might be considered differently if there had been an ending. The film doesn't really have an ending. It's really Bruce dying and Perry being the only person that's taking any kind of responsibility for the body and funeral, etc., etc. And he takes a suspiciously small amount of ashes.
I have that in my notes too. That's the smallest box of remains I've ever heard of.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, the reason I know about this is because when my mom passed, she was cremated, and that was not a small box.
No, likewise. Yeah,
So he's got
a fair amount of ash left over.
A cigarello box of Bruce. That's all he has. And he takes it out and he lets it go into the ocean. And the film not only doesn't wrap anything up, it doesn't even attempt to.
No, it just ends with a Langston Hughes poem called I Love My Friend.
Yeah. And the question will be, does that affect how we liked the film? Because we've liked the performances. We think it has important things to say. But does that make for a good film? I'm about ready. Do you have any more notes?
Yeah. Nope, I think I'm good.
The finish.
So, Max. Go ahead. Say really horrible things about black people.
Oh, yeah, this movie. You buy Constitution, took our jobs.
Yeah.
Yes, no. Yes, if you don't like this movie, you're a racist.
There you go. There, we're done. No, just kidding.
Yep. No. I like a lot about this movie. I'm not crazy about the end. I think it just sort of stops. I would have liked something a little bit more. But overall, I think the performances are fantastic. I really like. I wish I'd seen Roger Robinson in more stuff because my God, what a voice on that guy, and what presence! He's just good. And Anthony Mackie, for the first time, I'm impressed by him. This is not fair because in a superhero movie, let's face it, it's all about these days anyway, and the ones he ended up in. It's all about the special effects and the kabooms and the earth-shattering kabooms and the great big kabooms and that
Where's the kaboom?
Over there. Yeah, exactly. I think the acting in this is first rate. I think the pacing is terrific. This movie felt very short, and it is kind of short. I wish there was something that tied it more together. I was left kind of like, come on, what else? Because it sets up so much, and it's so much in this is so interesting. And also, so much of this makes me feel the lack in my own life of, I have got to read some of these people. I have got to go out and read some Langston Hughes and some Zora Neale Hurston. And whoever this guy, Bruce Nugent, who, when I first heard his name, I'm going, is that Ted's father?
Yeah, they're directly related, I'm sure.
Yeah, you could tell by all the guns. Yeah.
Did the quality of the film, like the literal film quality, put you off at all?
Honestly, yes, it did. I don't like that in Clerks either. I don't like a movie that makes it physically harder for me to watch it. I know that's shallow. I know in some cases it's supposed to be challenging. It's supposed to get across part of the message. I just found it like, could they not get a better print of this?
Well, no.
Yeah.
There isn't one.
What about you? So, for me, I like it. I recommend it. But I also have to say I'm a little ambivalent on some parts of it.
Okay.
What about you?
I really liked the film. Here's the thing. Of the two of us, I am a little bit more tolerant, I guess the right word is, for the ambiguous ending. And here's the thing. Perry's part of the film proves that a lot of the issues that were happening in Bruce's early life have not been changed. Like they haven't come to an ending either. And to me, the lack of distinct happy ending, oh, Perry gets a boyfriend, oh, Perry gets an art show, Perry, any of the revival, anything that might be an ending that we're used to, or really an ending of any kind, just sort of underlines the fact.
Doesn't have to be happy. I didn't say it had to be a happy.
I'm just saying that's what people mostly want. The fact that doesn't happen underlines the unfortunately sad idea that none of these things are likely to change anytime soon. And spoiler, they haven't. Yeah. I would say that in general, people are more accepting of gays now than they were even in the 80s. That being said, I don't know if that's true or if it's still more of an issue in the black community or not, because obviously I'm not part of that. So I didn't mind the fact that the film didn't really tie anything up because in this case, none of the issues in real life have been tied up. I hope that Perry does well. I hope that Perry continues, but I don't know. At the very least, it brought me the ideas of the Harlem Renaissance, jazz poetry, and all of this other stuff that I would otherwise not have been exposed to. Because, of course, none of these people are taught in school because, well, we know why. So And it is a very amateur production. It very much feels like it was either shot on VHS or, in this case, 16 millimeter. To me, though, that just added to the realism to it. And I'm going to, again, give a little bit of applause to Anthony Mackie. That's a tough role. It was one of his earliest roles. And never mind being a black actor, as we pointed out in our series and has been pointed out by plenty of other people better than us, black actors still have a really hard time getting decent roles, especially ones that aren't pimps or drug dealers or some other stupid crap. So he really took a chance on this role and went with it. He ran with it. And I think everybody else did in this film, too. I found everybody believable and down to earth. So, yeah, I recommend this film. You're going to have to rent it. It's not streaming anywhere.
Yeah, it's very hard to find.
You just rent it. I just went and looked on Apple TV, and I was like, oh, there it is. It was $4. So, yeah. But, go out and see that. But speaking of going out and seeing things, we want to know what it is that might get you back into the theater. And to that end, our question this week is, what kind of movie would you like to see more of in theaters right now? Something that perhaps isn't a superhero film or a remake of something or a reboot of something else or a reboot of a reboot of a reboot. What would get you to buy a movie ticket? And to tell us, you can email us directly at us@maxmikemovies.com. You could go to our website, maxmikemovies.com, where you can leave a comment, as some people often do. You can talk to people who are leaving comments. Give us ideas for series. You can give us ideas of movies we should watch, or you can give us comments about a show saying, you screwed up, or you guys are amazing. Just like,
Especially that last one. We like that a lot.
Yeah, just like Doug Henning.
We're desperate for external validation.
Actually,
love us!
Actually, we kind of like the letters where it's like, you guys got this wrong. Adam.
Yeah.
So there's that too, but you can also find us on Facebook where we are Max Mike Movies. And of course, if there is a podcast app, then we're probably on it as Max Mike Movies. Don't forget though, we have a hotline and you can call us at 617-398-7266. That number again, 617-398-7266. The only phone number I have immediately in my memory that I can just blurt out without having to look up. Isn't that sad?
Wow, that's sad.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. We're also on Blue Sky.
Oh, yes, Blueski. Don't forget Blueski. So, yeah. And, we love your answers, so please give us more answers. But to give us answers, you're going to want to hear what we're doing next week. So, Max, we're going to close up this series on Remember, You Asked For It. And what are we going to watch?
This is a suggestion from Val.
Who?
Val Coons, the producer and creator of the second greatest podcast in the universe.
Nope, don't know her.
Cue Footsteps. Oh, yeah.
Weird.
I think she mentioned you somewhere.
Weird.
Yeah. Yep, it's a Robert Mitchum, Jane Russell noir film.
Ooh, that sounds tasty.
Which I have from 1951 called His Kind of Woman.
Oh, I wonder who his is.
I assume it's starring Animal from The Muppet Show. My kind of woman!
I'm going to say that 1951 is pre-Muppet.
Could be.
Mitchum!
But we're going to find out. Wrong one. We will find out next week when we find out the findings.
By Mitchum.
This has been a co-production of The Voice of Max and The Movie Wrench.